Good afternoon, good morning. Thank you all for joining us for July's ECLI webinar. Now, if you aren't familiar with ECLI, we're the Early Career Librarians Initiative associated with the South Central chapter of the Medical Library Association. My name is Katie Pierce-Ferrier, and I'm the co-chair of ECLI with my colleague, Sandra Desjardins. We're partnered with NNLM Region 3 to launch this webinar series on topics that are useful to LIS students, early career librarians, and new to medical and health science library folks. So we're pleased this month to welcome Melissa DeSantis and Dr. Emily Vardell with us today. Melissa DeSantis is, sorry, I forgot to scroll through my slide. Sorry about that. So Melissa DeSantis is the director of the Strauss Health Sciences Library at the University of Colorado Medical Campus. She has been in her current role for 8 years and has been working as a librarian for over 25 years. As a library director, her role includes offering and negotiating positions to librarians. She has participated in mentoring several librarians through formal and informal processes. She's been active in professional associations at the state, regional, and national level. And then in her free time, she enjoys taking vacations, running, and spending time with her husband and dogs. We also have Emily Vardell with us. She has a PhD and is an associate professor in the School of Library and Information Management at Emporia State University. She teaches graduate courses on the foundations of library and information science, reference services, research methods, and health science librarianship. Emily studies health information behavior, focusing on health insurance literacy and how people make health insurance decisions. She's earned her PhD from the School of Information and Library Science at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill in 2017, and her Master of Library Science degree from Texas Women's University in 2007. So in today's webinar, our speakers will give a presentation on Know Your Worth, Mastering the Art of Salary Negotiation. So thank you both for being with us, and I will turn it over to you all.
Great, thank you, Katie. Let me share our slides. All right, and great to see everyone here. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to meet with Emily and I, and we are happy to take your all's questions too as we go through the presentation. So feel free to put questions in the chat all throughout, and Katie's going to help us manage the chat because I can't see it at the moment, which is fine. If there are questions that we can answer right at that moment, we will. Otherwise, we'll hold them for the end if it's something we think would be better later on. So with that, I am going to go to our next slide, which is our agenda. So these are the topics that Emily and I are going to be covering today. So we're going to start out talking a little bit about what salary negotiation is and why it's important. We're going to talk then about your personal skills and achievements. We'll touch on salary benchmarks, and then we'll move into negotiation strategies, both from the employer's point of view and from a job seeker's point of view. And then we will wrap up with how do you evaluate a compensation package, and hopefully some tips for those of you who are students. And then we'll have a bunch of time at the end too for Q&A. So to start with, what is negotiation? These definitions here from the Oxford Dictionary and from Wikipedia are just for negotiation. And you can think of that negotiation in terms of salary, which is what we'll be talking about today. The goal of negotiation, honestly, is to reach a shared agreement. And as the Wikipedia one says, it's a dialogue between folks to craft outcomes to satisfy various interests. So that's really what the goal of negotiation is. So I want to encourage you to think of it more as a discussion and a collaboration, and not so much a competition or a contest, which is how I feel it looks sometimes when they show it like on television or in the movies, because that hasn't been my experience. So the importance of salary negotiation is something that I vividly remember learning about in 2011, 2012, when I was in a leadership program. And this leadership program was for women in higher education. And there was a book that we read there were several books, but one of the books that we had to read was called Women Don't Ask. And later on I can put the link to the Amazon to that book. The book was published in like 2007, so it's a little old, but it was a fascinating book for me, and the research they shared in there was really eye-opening for me and has impacted me over time. The research that they shared showed that in general, men see way more things in life as negotiable than women do. And so because of that, when women are negotiating for positions and jobs, they don't always advocate or negotiate for a higher salary. So we can have two people hired at the same time for the exact same job, and they have different salaries, which might not sound that bad. But the research also shows that that salary difference, the person with the lower salary never catches up, even if those people get the exact same cost of living increases or merit increases every year, that person's always going to be behind. And those effects just become more dramatic over time because of compounding. In their research, what they found is, and a lot of people at that time were believing that the pay gaps between men and women, and they were specifically looking at gender, but these same differences pay out with any type of diversity. But in their research, they were looking primarily at men and women, and that they feel that was that could be the reason why women are paid less in the US than men, because they start out lower. So my takeaway from that was that you want to try to negotiate for the highest salary that you can when you're starting your position, because it's going to be challenging to catch up over time, even if you are a stellar performer and receive merit increases. And the other takeaway for me is that was an enormous return on investment for a one-time negotiation and a one-time conversation. I will in the private sector. So I work at the University of Colorado, which is a public institution. In the private sector, there's definitely a culture of expectation that when you offer a position to a candidate that they are going to negotiate. And so if one doesn't negotiate, they kind of look down. And I think in the private sector, there is often they can maybe offer low because they're expecting somebody to come back, so they want to have somewhere to go. My experience has been all in public higher education. It's a little bit different, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. I do have colleagues that work in private health sciences libraries, and they're not trying to give people lower salaries, but that culture is out there, although I do think it is changing. So once we know that negotiation is important, why don't we do it? So one of the reasons is we don't know that negotiation is an option. And in the US, we don't typically negotiate for prices at the grocery store or at Target or anything like that. We do it in certain situations, like maybe you're buying a new car. We know that there's going to be negotiation there, but for the most part, we don't do it. I think it's also because it feels uncomfortable to us, and some of that is because of societal forces or societal culture. It can be interpreted, our fears that it's going to be interpreted if we're negotiating and asking for something more than what we were offered, that maybe we're rude, maybe we're ungrateful. And so there's that anxiety or that fear that we're going to damage a relationship if we ask for more than what was offered to us. What I want to try to reassure you throughout this webinar today is that in the arena of job searching and negotiating for jobs, as long as you're honest and respectful and you treat the other person in a respectful manner, you shouldn't be worried about that. And you should be thinking about it in terms of getting to a situation where you're going to feel comfortable taking a position, and the employer also needs to feel comfortable with the process the discussion they've had with you. And as I mentioned earlier, think about it more as a discussion, a conversation. It's not a contest, because in the end, you want both people to get something. And from an employer's point of view, I want to fill a vacancy. Like, I want that person there. So if we've gone through the process and I'm actually offering them position, like, that's the person that I want. So I do want something, and you as the applicant seeker have something that I want. So have some confidence there. No one's gonna it's highly unlikely that if you ask for a higher salary or something else in the negotiation process, that an employer is going to rescind their job offer. So and we'll talk more about this later, but it's the point of being respectful and honest during the process. For myself personally, when I am in a position to offer a job to someone, I'm always trying to create the best offer that I can, and I will try to offer. I will offer the highest salary that I believe that I can offer and the benefits. I do that for a couple of reasons, and one of them is from reading that book. And I know people are uncomfortable asking for more, so I want to set my employees off to be in the best situation that they can be. I also know that folks are uncomfortable asking for more for negotiating. So I know that there's a possibility they might not negotiate, and I don't want to. So that's why I don't want to start out with a low offer. Sometimes that means, though, that people will ask for more money, and I can't give them any more because I already gave them all that I can. And when that happens, and that has happened, I try to be very honest about why I picked the salary amount that I did and why I cannot go any higher. But I will talk about other things that I can offer, and we'll talk more about that later. So I know that I have talked with other library directors, especially people who have been new to being a library director that had to make their first offer, and I've tried to encourage and mentor folks to do that too. That being said, I do know that I have peers, other library directors, who don't have the ability to negotiate on salary, and they don't have the ability to make those changes. So as you'll see during the webinar, there's not a whole lot of hard rules. So the idea of being flexible and having that conversation is what I want to stress to folks. And I also want to say be optimistic, because the research does say that if you are optimistic going into negotiation, you will do better. I believe this is Emily's slide.
Yeah, thank you, Melissa, for providing that helpful foundation. And I'm really enjoying the chat. We've got some good conversation going on there that's running parallel to what we're talking about. So, and now that we have that kind of context for the situation you might be in, the feelings you might be having, we're going to move to some of the tangible things that you can do to prepare yourself to do this salary negotiation. So the first thing you want to do is reflect on your own personal skills and achievements. And the guiding question for this is, how are you going to add value to the library? Because you're asking for salary, which equals money. How are you going to bring money and value to the library? So things you can do are, of course, to look carefully at your CV, your resume, compare it with the position descriptions, and look and see where they match. Look at the position descriptions of previous positions that you've had. What can you tie into what they're looking for and what you have experience doing? You can also connect to some internships. If you haven't had previous jobs in libraries, are there related positions or internships, field work, things like that you can connect to? If you're a student or a recent graduate, is there coursework that you have that specifically ties to the position, or training? That could be CE. So NNLM offers great webinar opportunities. So if you participated in training, is there other things that you can tie to? And then also you can outline specific tools, and sometimes position descriptions will even say preferred qualifications, experience with XYZ database or tool. And so if you have if you do have some kind of training or experience working with those tools, obviously that's something you can point to. So if thinking about the student perspective, you might look at assignments where you had to create a product like a LibGuide, and you can say, I have experience building LibGuides. That's core to this position. That's something that I bring to the table. I won't need as much time to, learn LibGuides. I, have some creative ideas of how to make them engaging, et cetera, et cetera. So, these are all things that you can specifically point to in your own personal set of skills and achievements, and always thinking about how can I tie it back to the job description when possible. And it's really good to also it's almost like a mini prep for the interview itself. All these are things that you'd probably want to do when you're getting ready for the interview, but you're going to want to think about them again when doing the salary negotiation. And the salary negotiation is taking place after the interview, where you've probably collected even more information than is possible in the job description. So things might have come out from the questions that they asked or the things they shared with you that they're really looking at someone who has great communication skills. And maybe that wasn't in the job description, but you can say, I have experience with editing, or I, have this blog that I've read, or, whatever the case might be, tying it back to things that you picked up on, either written down in the job description or also in the interview, that you can specifically tie and say, my experience with this ties to this that you're looking for, which is bringing value to the library. If you have other ideas, feel free to put those in the chat as we move to the next slide.
Muted myself and I forgot. So the next topic that I wanted to check on was benchmarks, and I believe this will resonate with all of us as librarians, is that you always want to have a data-informed research. And so part of what you're going to want to do is see if you can find out what other folks are getting paid. And there's a couple of different ways that you can do this. The points that I want to point out is that you want to, as much as possible, see if you can find positions that have similar work duties. So if you're a metadata expert, what are other metadata librarians getting paid? And so you also want to see if you can find similar markets. And by markets, I'm mostly talking about geographic areas, because cost of living varies in different parts of the country. So what a metadata librarian gets paid in New York City is probably going to be different than what a metadata librarian gets paid in Emporia, Kansas. So you want to take those things into account. And honestly, I would also suggest too that as you're applying for positions, you look at these things before or when you are applying to positions, because if there is a certain amount of money that you need to make in order to pay for everything in your life, you want to make sure that jobs you're applying for can meet that salary. So there's a couple of places, there's a number of places, but I just wanted to share some of the ones that that I'm most familiar with. So there are professional associations that create these data sets and make them available. Some of them are going to be freely available. Some of them are available to members of the professional association. Some of them you have to pay for no matter what. So there's a lot of variety. One of the tricks or tips that I want to offer to you is that oftentimes libraries have a subscription to one or more of these data sets. So back in the day when everything was in print, you could go physically to the library and the books were just there on the shelf and you could pull them out and you could look at them. Now, most of these things are electronic, but if you can go into the library, if you can access some of their resources, if you have a friend who's a member of one of these associations, if you have a mentor or another colleague, you can ask if they can help you get access if you don't have access. Those are all options that are available to you. So the first one I have on there is the annual statistics of medical school libraries in the US and Canada. This is created by OSLD, the Association of Academic Health Sciences Libraries. We often just refer to it as the OSLD stats. And in the next slide, I can give you another kind of screenshot from it. OSLD is, so this is an example of one where the members in this association are actually libraries. So individual people cannot join OSLD, only libraries can. So they do an annual survey. A salary survey is one of the surveys they do that they send to libraries. And so myself as the director, I receive the survey and I have to put in all the salaries for the folks who work in our library. And then they collate all that information together. So it can be really helpful. The Medical Library Association is similar, also medical libraries. The difference there is that the members are individual people. So I myself join the Medical Library Association. So they do salary surveys, but they don't do them nearly as often. So the last time they did one was in 2017. They sent a survey out in 2023, but it's not, they haven't released the results yet. So that one's not out there yet. But when that one comes out, that one will be helpful. That one's going to be based on what individual people, however many members responded, and if they actually were comfortable submitting their salary. And then there's other groups too, like for example, the Law Association, the AALL, American Association of Law Libraries, they have theirs. So there's a bunch of them. The other really big one is ALA APA. And so that's the American Library Association, and they partner with the Allied Professional Association. I'll talk more about that one in a minute because I have a screenshot from that one. ARL is the Association of Research Libraries. That's another one where the libraries report the information. ARL libraries are usually large academic libraries, so it doesn't apply to all the variety of academic libraries that are out there. They only have 127 members, but they are out there. And then if any of you actually are interested in public libraries, ALA has public library salary data, but the state library in your state, most state libraries, not all of them, but most state libraries do have some salary information, and they make it freely available. There we go. Okay, so this is a screenshot from the Oswald stats. And so the Oswald stats are one where the statistics are, they do them every single year. So this is the one from last year's, this is the most recent one. This is from the 23-24 year. And so they have a whole bunch of salary information that they share. And I just pulled this one out as an example. So in this one, they're showing salary by years of experience. And because this is ECLI, I thought that was potentially the most interesting one to you all. So you can see the first row in each of these is for 0 to 5 years. And there's a lot of data on here, but the one I'm just putting the red circle here around, this is the first quartile. So if you think of salaries in a range, the first 25%, this is what they are. So in that top box from 0 to 5, the first quartile, I'm just going to say it's 59,000 for the salary. But then if you jump down to that second group, this is for the public school. So this is where like my library would fall in. For 0 to 5 years, it's 55. It's a little bit lower. Whereas for private schools, you can see for 0 to 5 years, the first quartile is 63,000. So that's just going to give you some information about this is the range that you can potentially expect to see when you're applying for positions. They do have geographic information within the Oswald stats, but for those ones, they don't break it down by years. So that's why I didn't include that one. They have a lot more information about director salaries, associate directors, deputy directors than they do for the vast majority of librarians who are not in those roles. And with this one, if you're a member library, you get access to the stats for free. So in the past, we would buy this book and it would be on our shelf. But if someone came to me through a professional association, like Emily and I know each other because we're in the same chapter, I'd be happy to give somebody, let them see our stats. So librarians are pretty friendly. This is an example from ALA's salary data. This screen is really, I feel like this font's really tiny, so I apologize. This is from their most recent version that's available, and this is from 2019. If you are an ALA member, you have access to their salary database, so you can go in and you can look at these. So I just pulled for beginning librarians, because this presentation again is for ECLI. And I think I put, yeah, so the mean, so the kind of average salary for a beginning librarian in all states, that's that top box, and it's almost 54,000. But you can see in the lower box there, is the regional data. So this is for the West and Southwest. And so that's where Colorado falls. The mean salary is 63. So that's just to kind of give you an idea of how salaries, which I'm sure you knew, they do change across the country. But just to give you an idea of where that is falling, because that's data that you can bring to the negotiation process and say, you know, I know beginning librarians in the West and Southwest make a mean salary of around 63. So I was kind of looking for something in that range. Let's see, is there anything else? So this is free for ALA members. And I'll be honest, I'm not an ALA member, but one of the librarians I work with is. And so I sat next to her and she logged in and she played with the salary data with me. So that was actually how I got this. It is $250 if you want to subscribe for a year. So if you want to do that, you can do that too. And then just for fun, I decided to throw in some public library examples, because the public library examples are wildly different because they're put together by their state library. So I live in Colorado, so this is how they display their data. This is from 2022. And I just highlighting here, if you're just a general librarian, non-supervisor, that's how they do it. You can see that the average salary is 29,000 for on the low end, and on the high end, it's around 43,000. So depending on your years of experience, you know, you can kind of get a feel for where you might fall in there. And then just to show you how it varies from state to state, Here is Kansas, where Emily is, and I picked Emporia Public Library, and they report their data a little bit differently. So here's a public services librarian. The current hourly salary there is $21 an hour. So it's a little bit different at all the state libraries, but most of them do have that information. And then I'll just kind of talk then now about the negotiation strategy from the employer's point of view. And what I did want to reiterate is that as an employer, I want to fill a vacancy. So I want whoever I'm offering the position to say yes. So I want to try to make the strongest offer that I can make. I do have some constraints or some areas I need to work within. I don't just have a free for all. As much as my staff actually think that as the director I'm all powerful, I am really not. I have certain powers, but there's other areas where I don't have powers. And I will say this is where it will very much vary at every single institution. I read something once where the quote was, "Universities are Byzantine organizations," and that's definitely true in higher ed, that's where I have spent my entire career. So what's even in the University of Colorado system, there's different rules for me at the Anschutz Medical Campus than there are for folks at the Boulder campus. So that's coming back to the flexibility and thinking about what things do you really want or need as a candidate. So I do have control over a lot of my budget. So I can set whatever salary I want when I post a position. The constraint I have there is based more on equity, and I'll talk about that next. Once I set a salary, and I have to set the salary before I post it, that's the salary that I have to go with. So in Colorado, we post a salary range. We're required by law. So every position we post is going to say the salary range is going to be between this amount and this amount. And so my tip to you is most of the time when you see a range, that's the range. You're probably not going to be able to go higher than that range. You can always ask, and people regularly ask us when we post positions, like, I see your top salary range is 80,000. Are there any options to go above that? For me, there's not. So the reply is no. But for others, they might say yes. So I encourage you to ask those questions. I do know, though, I do have peers at other places where their salaries are set by central HR, and central HR pulls data from other data resources to try to set those salaries. So in those cases, those library directors don't have any, like, the salary for an entry-level librarian is going to be this range, and that's all that they can post, and they don't get to create a different number.
You gonna go get your breakfast?
Oh, was that a question? I'm sorry. So my peer library directors that are like that, they spend their time working with HR trying to adjust those ranges. So I don't have to do that, but I do have to keep in line with equity. So I already have employees that are here, and I can't bring in somebody new and pay them more than somebody else that's already here doing a similar job. So that's what I look at when I'm posting a position, creating a position. I'm looking at the job duties. I'm looking at the rank of the librarian, where they're going to be, because we have different ranks for the librarians. And then what are other folks in that same rank getting paid? And then the range is similar to that. So I am when I make an offer to somebody, I will remind them, like, we posted this as an assistant professor position, and this was the range. And based on your years of experience and expertise, I'm offering you this salary. Because I want to be sure they understand that it's not just a random number I pulled out of the sky, but that I am trying to keep things in equity. I have had people that have asked for more than what I can safely defend based on their years of experience and the skills and qualities that they're bringing to the position. So I've had to tell them no. And I've explained why, and I've so far kept all those. I've lost one because they could not deal with the lower salary, but most of the rest of them I've been able to keep. And I have had folks that have come in, like we've advertised like an entry level position and we've had somebody apply who has more experience than that. But because I posted at that range, I could only go up to the top of the entry level range, even though they might have had more years of experience than that. And I explained them. I explained that to them too. So I would definitely pay attention to the salary range. I do realize there are certain places where institutions don't allow a salary range to be posted, or they only allow an entry level range. And so then that's where I would encourage you to go through and see if you could find some data from other organizations about what folks in those areas are getting paid, so that you have a better idea of what your options are and how big that range might actually be.
Melissa, there's a question related to this. Laura asked, I've heard that most universities won't hire above the midpoint of their range. Is that true in your experience? I wasn't sure if you wanted to touch on that now before we move on.
Yeah, I can definitely touch on that. So that is common in universities. At the institutions I worked at, that has not been the case, but I do know that is common at it is. I don't have a number to give you, but that is something that does happen, where they have posted a range and they want, and I will say for our university staff that we hire, not our faculty librarians, but for our university staff, they're always looking in that first quartile when they post a position. So we have a little bit more flexibility, but that is definitely the case at times, yes.
And then there was also a question about how accurate, useful are the salary ranges in postings on MLA, ALA, or other postings. I've seen some with a very small range or none at all.
Yeah, so the none at all ones are probably institutions, and I know I'm not going to name any states, but there's some states where they're like not allowed to post a range, and it irritates those library directors to no end. Because I will say we started posting ranges before it was even a law here in Colorado, because I would post a starting salary and people were asking for stuff like $70,000, $50,000 more than that. And there was no way that was going to happen. So that's when we started posting ranges even before that. If it's a small range, my guess is most of the time that's what they have. And they could be one of those institutions where the salary is set by HR. So the library doesn't have a ton of wiggle room. They only have that, whatever is in that range. So if that range is close to what you're looking for, I would reach out and definitely ask the hiring. When the jobs are posted, there's always a person to contact for more information, and ask them if there's any wiggle room or what the likelihood of wiggle room is, and see what they say. Because people do regularly ask us, so it's totally fine to ask, and it's better to ask before you apply for a position, go through a whole interview process, and then find out they have no wiggle room. That answered the question. Thank you. So the next thing I want to be sure and talk about is that all libraries belong to some kind of larger organization, and that organization is going to put some constraints on them. So there are a bunch of things that I do have flexibility on when negotiating, and then there are another bucket of things that I have no flexibility on, and those are going to vary from every institution. So think about how important these things are to you as an individual, and which ones and how flexible you can be on them. And I know Emily's going to talk more about this, but I can just give you, for my example, I can't give more vacation days and I can't give more sick days. And I've been asked, and those are totally fine asks. And as I mentioned earlier, I can't go over the range that was posted, the salary range that was posted in the job ad. But there are things I can be flexible on. So those are things like professional development funding, relocation money, if you're coming from another state, start date, hybrid schedules. If I'm offering a job to somebody and they're like, I really want to take this job, but I have this big vacation planned next month and I'm not going to have enough vacation days, like those are all things I can be totally flexible on when I am working with a candidate. So there's a whole range of things that you're going to want to take into consideration, and just know it's going to be different at every place. It's kind of like the Wild West out there. There's no set rules. The other question I get asked a lot, and I didn't put the bullet on here, is how does this negotiation actually happen? And again, there's no real set way. The one thing I will say is that you really should not have to talk about or negotiate salary until you have a job offer. and I'm hoping most libraries won't won't ask you these questions. It's really not an appropriate question to ask until you actually have a job offer in hand. And as you as a candidate, it's not something that you saw what was posted in the job ad, or something hopefully in the job ad, so you have an idea, or you were able to pull some data from some other sources. So if an employer were to push you, you would want to say something like, I'm fine with the salary range that was posted in the job ad, or something like that. So typically there is someone who's designated as the hiring authority. It might be the library director, but it might be somebody else. That person will reach out and make a verbal offer to one as a candidate. Please keep in mind, you're not expected to accept it on the spot and you're not expected to negotiate right at that moment. You want to listen to what they have to say. You want to take some good notes about what they're offering. Salary, start date, relocation fee, those things. You want to say that you're excited about the offer, and that you want to take some time to think about it. You can it's fine to ask for a couple of days if that's what you think you're going to need. They should be good with that. That'll give you a chance to step away, take a breath, think about what they offered you. They might not give you anything in writing. You can definitely ask if they'll give you anything in writing. And part of the reason some places don't give anything in writing is because their fear is that if they put it in writing, the candidate's going to take it back to their current employer and try to negotiate for a counter offer. I personally will do it verbally, and then I will follow up in writing, because I know it's a high stress environment. And if they get a counter offer, they get a counter offer. These things happen. I'm not gonna, but just so you know, that's why some places won't put it in writing. This is a big change when you're taking a job offer. So you should be given at least 24 to 48 hours to think about it. So I would say one red flag for you would be if an organization is pressuring you to make a decision on the spot or in less than 24 hours. Think about that. This negotiation is the start of a relationship with an employer. And so you want to start that off on the right foot. That goes for them too. That goes for me as an employer. So think about, is this an organization I want to work for if they're pressuring me to make this really high stakes decision in a really quick manner? You want to give them a date when you'll get back to them. Like, I'll get back to you tomorrow. I'll get back to you within 48 hours. And you guys can decide how you want to have that conversation. Some employers might want to do it all on the phone. Some might say you can do phone or email. It's fluid. It's based on how people prefer to operate. I personally like to do it on the phone just so I can get through it a little quicker. I've gone through some where I've done on email, and it's like a lot of emails over numerous days going back and forth. But it usually is pretty fluid. If the employer has a preference, they will definitely let you know. Like, I want you to call me. I prefer that you call me, something like that. And the last red flag that I will give you is that, so when you get back to them, then you'll give them your offer. You'll say, I know you offered me this. This is what I'm looking for. And then you guys can start that conversation. And Emily will talk more about that piece. The other red flag I will give you is if an employer is not willing to have that conversation, they're not willing to negotiate on anything. Make sure they have a really good reason why they can't, because I personally don't know why they wouldn't be able to negotiate on something. So if they don't want to have any conversation, that might be a red flag too. All right, I'll turn it over to Emily.
Those are such great tips, Melissa, and I really like the way that you phrased, reflecting after you've got the offer and you're coming back, like, this based on XYZ, which we kind of talked about, and we'll talk more about. I'm looking for this level. Someone asked in the chat, would you say, I don't know if I'll be able to find it, but it was, can you go higher? Like, I would not ask a question that could be answered yes or no. I would make a statement like, given my experience in XYZ, I am looking for this salary, period. So that it's not like a no, the person has to say, well, okay, yes, that's true, but they have to come back with something. So just wanted to put that out there, that I think going with that confidence and starting off on this, open and professional relationship. I want to echo what Melissa was saying, that this is the start of many conversations you'll have going forward. So being really, clear and setting expectations. I think all of this is really important. So I just want to put kind of that wording, thinking about the wording is really important. And I might write it down, even if it's going to be a phone call, I might write down exactly what I'm going to say or practice. I'll talk about that in a minute too, but just wanted to mention that. So again, some other things that you want to do on the job candidate side. So Melissa was kind of talking more about the employer side, thinking about the person looking for the job, of course, and this has got many people have echoed this in the chat. Even before you apply, look at the job salary and decide whether this is something that you can live with. And, even if you're not able to get information ahead of time, like, will they be able to go like 10,000 more? Or, if it's way out of the range, like if it's $30,000 less than what you thought, I mean, that you don't apply. But if it's important to look ahead of time. You can consider reaching out if you think that's appropriate. But some places will offer a salary range, some won't. Ahead of time, but if that's available, great. Or you can look for some of these resources like Melissa was showing that will kind of give you a sense of where the job salary might be. And then you also want to think about what else is important to you. And I have a whole slide on this. Melissa hinted at a few of them already. But I just want to say, in addition to salary, things like, workplace environment, what is the culture like? Personally, I work in a institution. My library school has such a good workplace culture. There's such a emphasis on work-life balance. I, routinely hear from my dean, take care of yourself first. To me, that is worth, a lot of money to me. So sometimes you want to think about what else is important to you besides salary. Are you living near family? Are you in a lower cost of living area? Do you feel really strongly about the school? Are you an alum or something? There's a lot of things that might be important to you. So kind of keeping in mind all of this in your head, looking at those research salary benchmarks that Melissa was pointing us to, kind of getting that into your part of your negotiation strategy. And then, like I was saying earlier, looking at the job duties and really honing in on where you excel. What makes you stand out as a candidate is most likely the reason why they're offering you the job. You're really good at XYZ. You're really good in front of a group. You have great teaching strategies. You really shine. You can command a classroom. That's something that they maybe got from the interview day. So this is something you can kind of come bring and say, I know you're really looking for someone who has really strong skills in information literacy instruction. I hope my demo was an example of how I excel in this area. Given that this is a huge part of the responsibilities for this position and my expertise and knowledge in this area, I'm looking for, XYZ. So again, thinking about the job duties, what makes you unique, where you excel, and, what you bring that is unique. And there's lots of different ways that you can do that. There, like diversity of that background, experiences that you bring. So just thinking about the job duties and who you are and where they meet together. So for the next slide, we'll look at that piece that we were talking about. In addition to salary, what else kind of goes into this? And basically everything on the screen is money. So beyond salary. And so it should all go into it. So I would encourage you, the salary is important, but there's a lot of extra money that's not even in that amount. And here's a lot of the things that you can consider. And I separated them by things I think you can probably maybe negotiate and things that you probably can't negotiate, but should be a part of your decision making. So things that you might be able to negotiate. Technology, like, are they going to set you up with a home workstation? Are they going to offer you a new laptop? Are they going to offer you an iPad? So like they should have some information about the technology. And sometimes they'll tell you, we have a $5,000 allotment for new hires that can be used for technology, and you decide how. So that can be part of your package. You also might want to think about travel. And this is an area where you might be able to negotiate travel to conferences, travel to do research, travel to do professional development. Maybe you want to do a leadership training. Do they fund this? Is it negotiated every year? Is it an amount that you can just expect? We have $2,000 every year, and I just basically can add that to my salary, because some places offer you nothing. So, that's something I have at my job. We have really good travel coverage. So I kind of add that to my salary because I can basically go to all the conferences I want to go to. So, not everyone is as fortunate. So that's something you should be keeping into your mind, because let's say you are really involved with a professional organization and it's not covered, that's coming out of your pocket. So, part of your salary is going away. Some places may also cover professional dues. As we all know, those professional membership dues can add up. So do they cover those? Do they cover CEs? Do they cover your AHIP? All of that kind of stuff can be things to think about. Kind of in that kind of package of money that has to do with travel, professional association involvement, things like that. You might also be able to negotiate time allotment. So what percent of your day is supposed to be devoted to research, to service, to teaching, all of that. So and sometimes that can be a question you can ask during the interview too, like what is the general breakdown of how the percentage of time is devoted to different aspects of this position, things like that. But that's something to think about, because if your institution requires research for promotion and tenure, and they're not giving you time to do research, that means you have to do it on your own time, and that's again money. So just thinking about if they are willing to work with you on that, or if you say, this is again something you can negotiate. So if you say, I see that the general expectation is that I'll publish an article a year, but there's only 10% currently devoted of my work week to research, can I negotiate that to 15% of my work week, or 20% of I don't know. You can think about how you might be able to negotiate that. Moving expenses is a big one. Some places just can't offer it. Some places can. They can be creative about it. I do want to say this is one that is like a one-time thing. So it's great, but a lot of these other things might be like more regular, like, $2,000 a year for travel. That's every year you can add it onto your salary. For moving expenses, it's a one-time thing, but it is a huge help, especially if you're moving really far. We all know that gets so expensive. And you can ask them if they get a flat rate, like you just get $5,000, you do what you want, or do they need to see all the receipts? That's things you can find out about. But just keeping in mind, that can be really helpful, but it is a one-time thing. And then any other additional compensation opportunities are there? Is it possible to do adjunct teaching? Other things, is it possible to earn time if I work on a weekend? If I'm at a professional conference, does that time become time off that I have later in the week? So just thinking about additional compensation opportunities might be something to negotiate. And then other things that you probably can't negotiate but should consider. So health insurance is a big one. So some institutions have just really excellent health insurance with really minimal monthly premiums, low deductibles. That, depending on your situation, could save you a bunch of money to not have to spend $3,000 every year on your deductible. It's only $500 if your family situation uses a lot of health care. That can be, again, money that you can kind of add on. And most of the time, especially in academic jobs, I will say in public library jobs, I think this is less common, but in academic library jobs, you're generally at the interview day, the whole day. And oftentimes you have a certain time set aside to meet with HR. This is where you can find out this information. You can ask them these kinds of questions. If you don't have that as part of your interview day, hopefully there's a website where you can go and read about it, or you might ask the person hiring can you send me some of the benefits information so I can review it. Hopefully you've already gotten that, but I just wanted to mention that you can, there's other extras, like do they offer life insurance, dental, vision, all of that kind of stuff. So you want to look at that and see what are they offering. And oftentimes that can be a real added benefit. Do they cover some of the nice to have things that not all health insurance does cover? All kinds of stuff like that. Another thing is time off. Do they lump sick leave with vacation leave? That seems to be increasingly common. I'm not a huge fan of that, but is it separate? Can you negotiate that? Do you have an option? You might need to look carefully, again, especially in academic libraries. faculty might have one thing, staff might have another. So being really clear on where do librarians fit in that. But again, it probably isn't something like Melissa was saying. Probably you can't negotiate like I want 25 days instead of 20, but you can clearly see if they only offer 12 vacation days in this, and maybe you're comparing two, and this other place offers 20 vacation days. Again, thinking about time being money, that's important. Other things about time off you might look at, maternity leave, other things like that. Do you have to be there a whole year? Is it paid maternity leave? Is it just time off? So you can, think about all of that in terms of the time off piece. A lot of institutions will offer tuition remission, which is a real added benefit. So think about that. Do you have to be there a certain number of years before it kicks in? Is it only for you? Is it for a spouse? Is it for children? This can be a huge savings. If you're at an academic library, you have kids that are high school age, and they can have their entire education for free. I mean, that's a huge amount of money you can add on top of your salary. And that's, you don't want to pressure your kids that they have to go there, but it's a nice to have thing. And then other things that you can think about are institutional discounts, like transportation. Do they offer bus passes? How much is parking? How nice is the parking? But also other discounts like for travel or other things, gym memberships. I've seen all kinds of stuff being offered in the institutional discount thing. And again, you probably can't negotiate it, but you can just kind of keep it in mind, like, oh, parking is a minimal cost. That isn't like, I don't have to take that off of my salary. Whereas other places, maybe the parking is $200 a month and you can't negotiate. So you just have to take it off of the salary immediately. So, and yeah, I like Kelsey's put in there how the vacation days are dispersed. You get them all, like the 20 days you start and you got your 20 days, or do you earn 2 days a month and you've got to, kind of bank them before you can take a longer time. So, I'm seeing some great comments in the chat too. So yeah, these are all things. If there are other things that you can think of that I haven't included here. Oh yeah, thank you, Diana. So hybrid versus on-site, how many telecommute days are available? Again, what kind of setup do they support for you at home? Things like that. Yeah. So these were the things that kind of came to my mind. Again, you just kind of want to put it all into the big picture and consider how all of this creates your work well-being. And some of the salary is important, but all of these things can kind of either add or subtract from the salary. So keep it all in mind. People have already talked about where you live. So I live in Kansas. It's much cheaper to live here than in Denver, where Melissa is. So, keeping in mind all of this should all go into the thought process. And when you are negotiating, if the person you're negotiating with says, I'm sorry, we can only offer the top level of the salary range that we posted for legal reasons, you can say, I understand. How about we look at travel? Is that somewhere where you can support more of my professional? I'm really involved in the Medical Library Association. I've attended every year. I've served in XYZ committee. I plan to continue that involvement. Will there be support for me to have financial support to attend, as well as time off? Some places don't give you time off to go to conferences. So all of that's just an example of what I would say, if I were kind of looking for opportunities. So those are all things that you can kind of think about. I'm seeing some more comments about FMLA too. So yeah, looking at the state level legal aspects and things like that. And I also, because this is the Early Career Librarian Initiative webinar series, we wanted to talk a little bit about student-specific tips. And I think probably a lot of these are helpful, even if you're not a student. But if you are a student, I'm particularly talking about that with wearing my professor hat. So I want you to think really broadly about what qualifies as experience. I know a lot of students kind of talk themselves out of things before they've even tried. And, some places, it's really limited on what they might qualify as experience, and other places are going to think more broadly about what qualifies. And so it doesn't hurt to try, is my feeling. So, you know, again, maybe you have not worked in a medical library before. What are other things that you can point to that might qualify as experience? So customer service is a really big one. If you're applying for a public services position and you have years of customer service experience, that's something you can talk about. You know, have you done training in that area? Have you had a leadership role in supervising other people who provide customer service? All of that kind of stuff can be in there. Do you have health related positions? I'm seeing more and more students who are, you know, previous healthcare providers. They are nurses, they work in public health. That can be something that you can highlight too. So I'm bringing my background as a dental hygienist to this dental liaison role. While this is my first position as a librarian, I believe my experience providing dental health care really you know, sets me apart from the other people who've applied for this position. I think that warrants a higher range of the salary range, XYZ. So hopefully all of this, like, example of what you might say is helpful, some of this wording that you might use. And then also social service, so social work, other kinds of outreach kind of positions that people might have held. These might tie in really closely to the position too. So think really broadly when the position says this requires experience. Here are some examples of where you might be able to point and say, I do have experience, and build on those when you're negotiating the salary. And if the person, you know, if the person at first says, well, you haven't worked in the library, so I really have to offer you the lower range, you can say that while I haven't worked in the library, again, like those examples I was giving, I have done XYZ, which I think warrants a higher level of the range of the salary. And they might already know that, but it's a good reminder to say that again, and to kind of, you demonstrating how you see that connection demonstrates to them that you'll be able to build on that when you hit the ground running in the position. You can also highlight coursework that ties to the position. I personally have done this. I was fortunate to take a lot of health related courses in my MLS and pointed to that, and that helped me stand out. So if you've taken, especially if you're applying for health related positions, pointing to health related coursework. I know not everybody here may be interested in health sciences librarianship, so you can point to other things as well that are specifically your coursework, how it ties to the position. There's increasingly courses offered, for example, in trauma-informed librarianship. I guarantee you probably nobody else working at that library took a class on trauma-informed librarianship. So that's a background and expertise that you bring that's unique, and it's a value you add to the library. Maybe you can say, based on the course that I offered, I think I'd be able to infuse this in my work. I might even be able to offer some training to other people, or start a journal club where we could look at trauma-informed librarianship, XYZ. So you can, again, point to some of the coursework you might have that is new and innovative, that offers something new that isn't already at the library. Other things might be outreach classes. If you've had classes in expert searching, that may not be necessarily visible to the person hiring you. They may not have your transcript. They may not know exactly what classes you've taken, but if you explain, I took a class in expert searching and advanced reference services, we learned how to search these databases, like being very clear that you have some experience, so they're not starting with scratch and expecting that they're going to have to train you from ground zero. Other technology classes as well. So kind of leading to that, the next point, outlining the specific tools you have experience with. So social media, again, may be a value added that you bring that is not, that there's a lack in the library. You may be able, like, you know, maybe your library is looking to get into TikTok and you actually have a lot of experience in TikTok. Well, you can, I wouldn't just throw that out there from nowhere, but if it was clear, like, oh, you know, where, maybe during the interview day, you were like, where do you see the library moving forward in innovative marketing approaches? And maybe somebody said, you know, we've seen a lot of cool things that libraries are doing in TikTok. We thought we might get involved with that, but we really don't have the expertise. And that kind of set a little, like, a little bell in your mind, and you thought, oh, you know what, I actually have some really cool TikTok ideas. I've got experience doing TikTok. So you might say, my experience with my own personal social media platforms and my training in this area might be able to invigorate the library's outreach and marketing. So that's an example that you might provide. You might have others experience with specific tools, like in research databases, library software, like I mentioned. If you've done database training sessions in your classes, built LibGuides, anything like that, just kind of pointing to expertise and experience with these tools that again mean that you bring a value to the library. And then again, what else do you bring that is unique to the library? What did you sense when you got there? This is something that I some experience, some background, some passion area that I have that will provide something unique to the library. Seeing some more comments. We may, some of the specific examples I love, we're going to touch on those in the Q&A session, but I just want to see if there's anything else. Yeah. You students can always plug your expertise in technology. Yep, comfort with hardware, software. I think that's something that they're often looking for new hires to bring knowledge in. Some other student-specific tips. So obviously do your research, and we've given several examples of how you can do that, looking at research, researching the salary benchmarks, looking at the position description, getting some tips during the interview day, looking at the library strategic plan, all kinds of things that you could do to do your research and then match it to what you bring. Then you also, like we were talking about, identify your approach. Are you going to email the person? Are you going to call them? I think I've only seen this happen over the phone, but it's possible that it may also occur via email. So you might ask about how that's preferred. Again, you might just, the person giving the offer might say, if you could call me back when you've made your decision, and that's the point where they're expecting you to bring your counter offer. You might also think about how are you going to approach this? Are you going to have one huge selling point that's like, my expertise in this thing is so intrinsic to this position and is so unique about me that this is the reason you're hiring me. This is the reason I should be paid more. So are you going to do that? Or are you going to list a bunch like, I do this and I do this and I do this and I do this? I think either one could work. I wouldn't go like nuts with a list and say like 20 things. But if you feel like, there were three, there were three things that you felt like really came out of the interview and there's areas where you could really bring some value, you could list, like list a few things. So just kind of deciding your approach, not just like, I'm so great, I think I deserve more, but like, what is it specifically? Are we picking one thing? Are we focusing on a few things that you do really well? So picking that so you don't spiral off and kind of trail. I could see you really easily being like, and I do this and I do, and then just kind of losing your steam as you're going through it. So picking your approach, I'm going to do this, being really intentional. This is what I'm going to focus on. And then practicing it. I would really suggest that, especially if it's the first time, practicing with a fellow student or an advisor, an instructor, a friend, your parents, your spouse, someone else that might be a resource. If you've been able to build up some kind of a mentorship relationship, either through a professional organization, or maybe you did do an internship somewhere, and so you've got a connection with someone who does this in other settings, but that's not where you're applying somewhere else. They might be able to give you some really good advice, practicing with them as well. So think about areas that you can get. And even if the person, like, even if it's your mom and she doesn't know anything about libraries, she can at least be a sounding board, and that after you've done it once and you've gotten your nerves out, the second time you'll be even more confident in doing it. And then, as we were saying, this is the first of many important conversations you'll be having. So you want to be firm, but also be polite. You want to come across as a strong, capable professional who is a good person to work with, but that also kind of, sticks to what they believe in and has integrity. So just think about that as you go through. And kind of in this whole be firm, be polite thing, another thing I wanted to say is just like preparing yourself for it. Anything you can do that will help infuse your body with confidence. I'm really into the Wonder Woman, Supergirl, Superman pose where you stick your chest up and put your hands on your hips and like stand up and really feel your power, channel your favorite superhero before you do that. Sometimes even like before I do a webinar, I might just be like, breathing in, or centering yourself, reminding yourself of all of your power. If you're a Ted Lasso fan, there's an episode of Ted Lasso where Rebecca does this like, I think that's a silly one, but if that helps you channel your power, do that. But think about how to, prepare yourself for the moment. And I'd even, obviously find a quieter place where you're not going to have distractions. Maybe even, put on a professional shirt so you're feeling really professional if it's over the phone and they can't see you. You may just want to kind of channel your most professional, sincere, respectful self. So think about that as you kind of come with this firm, polite attitude, channel all that confidence that you have, smile, all of that. And then also know your limits. So Melissa talked a little bit about those red flags. Just know, you've got to be a person living in this city, working with these people. You've got to know your limits. So it may be salary, it may be other things. So if you're kind of sensing, I'm just not really sure, try to see if there's someone you can check in with any doubts or questions. I just got a weird feeling that they wouldn't budge on this. Is that odd? And maybe somebody says, it is odd, but unfortunately it's just inherent in working in academia. And so you can just say, okay. Or the person might say, that is kind of odd that they just wouldn't share more information about that or budge on that. So you need to know your limits and know what you trust your instincts as well in this sense. And then finally, I'm always big into celebrate. Once you do it, celebrate. And even if you didn't get everything you were hoping for, still celebrate. Hopefully you have a new job and lots of new exciting opportunities, and celebrate that you took the time and had the confidence in yourself to try this. And hopefully you were able to negotiate at least one little aspect that has made your financial well-being and your work life situation even more positive. So just wanted to encourage you to do that. Sometimes we forget that, and changing jobs is so stressful. So try to celebrate the little wins along the way. So now I think we're going to move into questions. I'm going to try to scroll through. I'm going to do my best. I'll just hit with what I'm seeing right now, and then I'll scroll through. I see one about someone currently working on my MLIS, but I've worked as a pharmacist for 16 years. And someone even talked about being a pharmacy technician. I actually was a pharmacy technician too, and talked about how that helped me as a librarian. So Christina mentioned that too. So it looks like there's a good connection. I love seeing this. But I did want to echo, I've had several students and mentees who have experience working in the healthcare industry in a variety of ways. And I think many medical libraries really value this, even if it's not like a pharmacy technician or a pharmacy liaison, even if it's not, ideally, like in the dream, it would be, oh, you're the School of Pharmacy liaison. Wonderful. Like, obviously that's crystal clear. But even if you're not, even if it's some other position, evidence synthesis librarian, you can talk about being familiar with the terminology, knowing the literature. There's just lots of ways that you could highlight on that. So I really do think that that's something you can highlight. Just think about, you mentioned you're working on your MLS. So think as you're going through the coursework, thinking about what resonates with you as a pharmacist. What are some things that your pharmacy background is kind of adding to the experience? I know, having worked as a pharmacy technician, it's been extremely helpful to be familiar with drug terminology for searching. Just like that familiarity is really key. So just talking about the things that you bring that are uniquely yours, I think will translate really well. So Melissa, do you see a question you want to respond to?
So yeah, I'm going to stop sharing because I couldn't see anything. So now I can see more people and stuff like that. So, yeah, somebody actually put just right now about Glassdoor, in the chat. It looks like it was Eric. And I haven't used Glassdoor. I was under the impression you had to pay to use it, and I don't know if that's true or not. So I don't know if Eric or others want to comment on Glassdoor, because I just haven't used it.
We did get a couple questions at the beginning. I tried to bookmark them. So one of them was when you're talking about, marketing your skills and telling people, bringing your value to the library. Someone asked, how about language? I know multiple
Oh, yes.
languages, but I don't know how to advocate for this in salary negotiation. Sometimes it's not in the job description, but does not offer a salary increase. Sometimes it's just an expected thing that they can do.
I meant to mention that when I talked about additional special skills. Yes, that is a big one. I think you should talk about that. That is something that they should be paying for. That's a skill that you bring that other people don't. So they should be paying more for that. It shouldn't be just an expectation that you bring. And so I would look at what exactly might relate to the position description and the setting. So, for example, I worked at the University of Miami, a medical library, and they had a lot of Central and South American doctors who would come and do years at the library, and they needed people who spoke Spanish to work with them. So that may not be in the position description, but you might be able to read at the library's reports or kind of look on the university's website and see what they're doing. Are they doing outreach in the community? Then look at the statistics for the community. The community is, 30% Spanish speaking. Well, if they're going to do outreach, they need somebody who speaks Spanish. So those are some of the things that I might look for that maybe weren't in the position description, but are a key reason why they might need someone with that expertise. I don't know if you want to add anything, Melissa.
No, I was going to say, yeah, definitely any of those things that one can highlight that, and especially if you can connect it back to either the environment. I mean, we have a lot of international faculty at my campus. They speak all different languages, so because they're from all over the world. As when I'm making an offer to somebody, I have to feel comfortable that I am making an offer that is going to still have equity and that I can defend if I was challenged on it. I'm not expecting to be challenged on it, but I want to always act ethically. So as a candidate, if you can give me things that I can say, yes, and this person also speaks a second language. So that was another reason why I gave them a higher salary. Those are all things that I can use that if again, it was that case of if I was to get called on it, I'm not anticipating getting called. I'm never getting called, but it helps me as an employer feel like I have made that I'm making an ethical decision with real data, that are facts, that have an impact for the library and for the campus.
Awesome. And we had another question. So this was answered a little bit in the chat, but it might be good to go over a little bit too. So this person asked, what if you're already in a position for many, many years and the employer won't use MLA or other professional association salary benchmarks? It seems to me that employers are hiring people at higher wages as compared to those already in the position.
So I am happy to answer that question because that was the issue that we had at my institution. Folks had been here, and then honestly during COVID, right, inflation went up, cost of living went up. Other places were increasing their salaries, so I needed to increase our entry level salary. But if I increased my entry level salary, that was going to affect everybody else that was already here in the library. It was a lengthy process. It took about, I feel like 18 months that I had to work with HR to try to rectify that situation. In my perfect world, I would prefer to have increased my current faculty salary and then advertise the new wage. In the end, what actually happened was I posted a position that was entry level that paid more than some of my folks that were already here. When I did that, that created an equity imbalance. And at that point, then I was allowed to raise my other librarian salaries. So the way that higher ed works, it's just wacky. So if you are already in a place and others are coming in below you, one option you could have is to go to your equity office. If you believe people with less experience than you and a lower, don't have as many skills, are being paid more than you are being paid, you can go to your equity office. You can go to HR too. I've just found in my personal experience, the equity office has been a little bit better. On campuses, we are supposed to be watching out for equity with our faculty and with our staff. So that's something that I am responsible for. because I supervise faculty. So if it's not happening, the campus might need to step in and make sure that it happens. Some campuses, you know, maybe the person that did the equity assessments, because they do equity assessments on my campus, but if that position's vacant, you know, they get behind in it. So there's a whole host of reasons how that happens.
Do you have any other thoughts, Melissa, about negotiating when you're already in the position? Would you suggest like at the annual review point, or when would be a good point for salary negotiation if you're already at the job?
Yeah, usually the performance evaluation, so the annual evaluation is tied to some kind of merit increase. So that would definitely be a point to bring it up. So it's definitely an uncomfortable situation. But that is the point to bring it up. And honestly, it is, universities need to find a way to deal with folks that have already been there, and so their salaries are getting compressed. And unfortunately, it often falls to the employees to have to ask for that increase. But the annual evaluation is a perfect time. Yes.
Awesome. And then I caught one other question at the beginning, and please feel free to drop any other questions that you may have in the chat. But one other question that came in earlier was, can you explain about employers who have a salary scale? How can we negotiate for these kind of positions? You talked about that some, but they were saying some of the scales that they see usually start from 60K in California and ends at 140K. So that range is really vast. So maybe a little bit more about how you can kind of understand when it's a range that vast.
Yeah, that's a huge range. So I know my guess would be that they're potentially hiring that at various ranks. So my institution right now has a department head position that is posted, and it is posted as we're going to hire at either an assistant professor or an associate professor. But that difference is based on years of experience. And so we have clearly articulated this many years of experience qualifies you as assistant in the salary range, and this many years qualifies you as associate. So my guess would be they're doing something similar like that, but they haven't been as transparent as how those ranges work out. So I would reach out to the hiring. Sometimes it's somebody in central HR, sometimes it's somebody in the library, and just ask if they can give some information to indicate how that scale is being divided up. Because that's a huge range to go from 60. Did you say 60 to 100? That's a huge range. So yeah, they've got to have some way that they can make those decisions. And so you as a candidate, it's helpful to know that before you apply.
Oh, and then it looks like there's one more. I also got a couple questions too from this. The session is being recorded, and we will share it on our YouTube page and send that out to anybody that registered for this class as well. So it'll be out in about 2 to 3 weeks. But somebody also asked, if institutions cannot offer higher salaries than those of existing employees, how do institutions in lower cost of living areas effectively recruit applicants from higher cost of living areas?
So I'll say we actually put this in our calls for applicants. We put the Kansas has a lower cost of living. So I think you can explicitly state that when you're advertising the benefits. I know when I kind of did kind of an informal interview, they talked about it's a really safe place. There's no traffic. Like there's a lot of things that you can say that's harder to communicate verbal, like written. That was more of a verbal thing, but we do it specifically when we post things, talk about it being a lower cost of living. I've also seen, I think this is happening more and more frequently, are in webinars, kind of informational webinars about positions, where they're hosted using the Zoom webinar form. I'm sorry if you can hear the dogs, so they're going a little crazy. They use like the Zoom webinar format where you can't see who's attending. It's anonymous. So it's very equitable. People can attend and there's no divulging who's there, but they can share information about the position, talk about what's the benefits of working there, like a lower cost of living, like work-life the culture of the institution, the added benefits beyond salary, like all those things that I talked about. And then people can ask questions anonymously. I've seen this happening more and more. I think this is a really great trend. I hope this continues, but that could be another way to really highlight why it's helpful. But I will say, Heather, I so relate to this because I've served on several search committees in my institution, and people just don't apply because they see a lower salary range without realizing all of the things that come across. So that's why I'm really emphasizing this. Consider more than just the salary range. Yes, it's really important. Yes, you need to be valued for the work that you provide, but there are benefits beyond that too, and cost of living is one of those. But that's something, this whole thing is about salary negotiation, so I really want to emphasize the importance of that too. But that you want to think really holistically when you're thinking about taking a job.
And this has been so informative and so helpful. Thank you both for this. We have a couple more minutes, and it looks like we got one more question in. So someone asked, does HR inform you of the names of people who have asked HR questions before an actual interview or offer has taken place?
Yeah, I saw that question from Andrea. Yeah, so I would look and see if you can, so if it's central HR, they don't, because central HR they just do their thing like that's their job. And so they will just do it. For my library, when we post a position, the person who's listed as the contact is the HR person in our library. And so she takes all those questions, and no, she doesn't. She will tell me if we're getting a lot of questions, or she will tell me what type of questions, but she will not tell me the person. And that is something that her and I worked out together. I'm actually not on the search committee. I don't even know who applies. In most cases, I think that is the case where the director is not on the search committee. I only see the finalists that get referred and that come for the interview. So she will let me know what kinds of questions folks are asking, because that is something I'm like, oh, if people are asking this question, we need to be aware of this. But she won't give me names. And you can definitely check, because you can see if the contact person looks like somebody in central HR or if it looks like somebody who works in the library. It varies for every institution.
Sarah asked the $1 million question. Where do you see the trajectory of pay in higher ed going over the next 10 years? Oh, my dear. So I don't know if we have enough time to talk about this. I am very concerned about the future of academia and valuing what academia brings. I don't know, Melissa, if you have thoughts.
So I don't have thoughts, and well, I have a lot of thoughts, but I will say, my husband works in the private sector. And so this has been very interesting, and I got married later in life. And so it's very interesting to see his salary compared to my salary, but then we look at other things like benefits, especially retirement. Wow, huge differences what higher ed is contributing to my retirement. But that's not flashy, right? That's not something you can't eat that when you're in. You can't feed that to your kids. So yeah, so it's a balancing act, and I think I don't see higher ed paying a ton more, but there could be the reality where folks see some of the benefits from academia and higher ed that you get, like retirement, like healthcare, like time off. And folks that might be things where, because people talked earlier about work-life balance, where people might make those choices. But that's definitely the $1 million question.
And I also think that I hope there generally is more job security in academia. So I could also be making a lot more money working in a private sector, but every minute you're like potentially on the chopping block. They'll lay off 2,000 people at once. That doesn't tend to happen in academia. That doesn't mean that there aren't cases where librarians do have to be laid off for consolidation and other things. So I don't want to diminish if that does happen to people, but generally there's a little more stability, and that to me is also worth money, that you don't have this like hanging over your head constantly.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, both of you, so much. This has been, like I said, really informative, very, very awesome advice. And we had a lot of great chat and a lot of great information and links shared and advice in the chat as well. So thank you both.
Thanks for watching. This video was produced by the network of the National Library of Medicine. Select the circular channel icon to subscribe to our channel, or select a video thumbnail to watch another video from the channel.